We create these synaptic pathways that really help us go on autopilot so that life is like easier. And so when a huge shift happens like this, our synaptic pathways are like, what just happened? Nothing is normal.
You're listening to Good Faith Weekly. I'm Mitch Randall.
And I'm Missy Randall.
We're here each week exploring the intersection of faith and culture.
We find people who stand up, speak out, and step forward.
For inclusion, freedom, and justice for all.
It's time for Good Faith Weekly.
Brought to you by Good Faith Media. Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, Missy and I are going to catch up, and I've got a little quiz to give my co-partner in life. And then later on the pod, we sit down with Kinsie Tate. Kinsie is a licensed therapist as well as the founder of an organization called Restore Clergy. It is a fabulous episode that you're not going to want to miss. Hello there, Missy.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well, and you?
I'm a little nervous
Why is that?
because you told me to not come prepared, so I don't know what's coming.
Yes.
You do know I have just a little control issue.
Little control issues, so I can actually feel the anxiety from across the room.
You can see the sweat on my brow.
Exactly. Well, it is 110 outside.
You guys, I'm sorry if you can hear the fans going. Normally we turn all the fans off when we record so as to not, have background noise, but you're going to have to deal with it today. It's 110 degrees outside. The air conditioner in the house is trying as hard as it can.
Oh, it's working overtime.
It is what it is.
It is, absolutely. Well, Missy, one of your favorite activities on the pod over the last couple of years has been what?
Quizzes. And I think I know what's coming.
An
Olympics quiz. Okay, good. I had a feeling that's what's coming, but I have had no time to do research. So here we go.
Well, one of the things that we really do enjoy, we don't really follow Olympic sports all that closely. In fact, we don't follow them at all.
You don't watch dressage on the weekends?
I do not.
Did I even say that right?
I don't know.
It's a horse thing.
It's a horse thing.
It ends in sage. Dressage, not massage.
I can't remember.
We don't know. Yeah. It's a horse thing.
But every 4 years, we get into it. I mean, it's so fun.
We become experts in all the sports.
All the things.
Yes.
That's exactly right. So there is the 2024 Paris Olympics that is taking place right now.
I just have to tell the listeners right now that you have a stapled packet in your hands.
Well,
so let me just say this. When I bring a quiz, I've got like one sheet of paper with scratch notes and stuff. You have a packet. We may be here all day.
It's an Olympic sport just for me to blow up the letters.
It's so many pages, you guys. My apologies in advance.
All right. So, yes, I've got a little quiz that you can take about the Olympics, both past and present.
All right. Keep in mind, it's like 90 degrees in here.
I understand.
Let's go.
Okay, so question number one. Where were the first Olympic Games hosted back in 776 BC?
Like somewhere in Greece, right?
That's exactly right.
Athens?
Olympia, Greece.
Olympia. Oh,
yes.
duh.
And
I should have just stopped at Greece.
Follow-up question. Where was the first modern-day games held in 1896?
Greece?
You're right, Athens. Way to go.
And weren't they all naked in the first Olympics?
Well, if I recall when I was back there, no, I have no idea.
I thought it may be just an urban legend, but I thought that was the thing.
Now, following along this theme, what was the first U.S. city and state to host the Olympics?
I have no idea, so I'm just going to guess Los Angeles.
Well, you're close, but a little off. We're actually going to be in this city in a few weeks.
St. Louis?
St. Louis, Missouri.
Really?
Exactly.
They got a World's Fair and
the
an
Olympics.
Olympics.
First Olympics in the United States.
Interesting.
Isn't that crazy? All right. So, Missy, what year were women first permitted to compete in the Olympic Games?
I actually heard this earlier on the news, and I cannot remember. Was it in the 1940s?
1900.
1900?
Yep.
Okay. I did just hear this morning.
And it was actually in the Paris Olympics when women were allowed to compete. There were actually 5 sports that they were allowed to compete in. Can you name one of those?
Knitting.
Was that a time sport or was it like a score? Did they get scores?
I don't know.
Oh, no.
I have no idea. Was it swimming?
No.
Running?
No.
Gymnastics? Dancing?
No. Let me just
Archery?
It was
Dressage?
tennis, sailing, croquet, golf, and equestrian.
Croquet?
Yes.
Is that still an Olympic
I don't
sport?
think it is, no.
Oh, man, that's a bummer. Because if so, I was about to be an expert on it.
Which country has the most Olympic gold medals?
The U.S.
Absolutely.
I just heard that on the way here.
Do you know how many?
I know.
Under or over 1,000?
Over.
Over, yep.
Yeah.
1,022 to be exact. And of those 1,022 medals, with 28 medals, who is the most decorated Olympian of all time?
Okay. Oh, I know I've been hearing this. Is it the swimmer guy?
It is
Phelps?
the swimmer guy, yeah. Michael Phelps.
Okay.
Good job, man. You're not doing too bad.
I mean, I watch the news.
Now, this year, the Olympics is taking place in Paris, France. The 2028 games are coming back to the United States. What city will be hosting those games?
Well, you know what?
What?
I'm gonna go all Marissa Tomei and My Cousin Vinny and be like, you cannot answer that question on a technicality.
Okay, why not?
They're going to be officially held in Los Angeles.
Yes, that's right. You got
But
it.
as we know,
Yes.
as residents of the great sort of state of Oklahoma, there will be a couple of events coming here to our state. Yes.
Absolutely. Corn growing and what else?
Actually, I believe Oklahoma City is slated to.
Tornado wrestling.
Yes. You guys, it's hot.
It is so
Okay.
hot.
So, we are slated to get some of the rowing sports, and I'm saying rowing sports because I don't know what they are. Rowing, maybe rapids, and also as maybe softball.
Yeah, I believe so.
I'm not sure. So yes, so that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I got you on a technicality there, and I want bonus points for knowing 2 of the cities.
That's impressive. That's very impressive. So a couple of more questions. One is this. It's about...
What are we on? Page 15 now?
Yeah, something like that. So at this year's Paris Olympics, there is a sport that has been introduced that was born out of New York City in the 1970s. What is the new sport?
Breaking.
Break dancing. That's exactly right. I could have so competed in this.
I mean, those parachute pants. Y'all.
That's right. Absolutely.
I got to find them.
All right. 2 more questions, and they are gymnastic related.
These are the ones I won't know.
Oh, you should know this. If you don't know this, you need to hand in your USA card.
Okay.
At the age of 14, this Romanian gymnast scored 7 perfect tens in the 1976 Olympics. And who is that gymnast?
Oklahoma City, or actually Norman, Oklahoma resident, Nadia Comaneci.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Yep. She lives not too far from us.
And the final question. With a combined 37 world championships and Olympic medals, this woman is one of the most decorated gymnasts of all time.
I'm going to go with Simone Biles. I mean, is there any other answer to that question?
100%. Wow, you did a great job.
I absolutely did.
You rocked it.
And did not know that was coming. So mad props to me.
Yep.
Cliff, you're the decider. I'm pretty sure I got the highest quiz score in the history of Good Faith Weekly quizzes.
That is probably true. So, but we have been watching gymnastics this week, and we just finished watching the men and women compete in this Olympics. The men took home bronze, and the women took home gold. And you and I, when we watch Simone Biles, who was the answer to our last question, we are just mesmerized and floored by her abilities.
Honestly, by all of the gymnasts.
Yeah, absolutely.
But she's amazing. She's like superhuman or something. I don't know. But yes,
Yeah.
it's just in really all of the athletes, the giftedness, the rigor, the dedication they have to their sport is really inspiring to a point. I just don't have that in me to be like that.
Did you watch the Olympics growing up? Mm-hmm. So what is your probably favorite Olympic moment? And let's just keep it to Summer Olympics.
I don't really know about a moment. I just remember getting the Mary Lou Retton haircut.
You think he could still pull that off?
Heck, nobody should pull that off. Even Mary Lou Retton would agree that nobody needs to be having that haircut right now. Like, it was a thing, it had its moment, and now we're done.
Yeah.
Now we're done. We need a little pomade action happening these days. And a little texture cream, something. Let's make it, better.
Well, I have to admit, I wasn't a kid, but probably one of the most dramatic moments for me in watching the Summer Olympics was in 1996.
The fact that you remember the year. This is that Y chromosome thing happening.
Well, it may be in my big book of facts that I just flipped through. But when the women's gymnastics, they were doing the team gymnastics, it was coming down to that last, I think it was a vault. And Carrie Scruggs? Scruggs?
I don't know. Carrie S.
Yeah, Carrie S. Hobbled up on and ran down and just nailed it, and raised her hands, but then winced and
had to be carried
off, and they won gold. That was just,
I do remember that moment. It was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Just what they persevere through is unreal.
Yeah. So anyway, that's my quiz. So
that was fun.
Yeah.
Especially because I did well. I believe I've got a 4.0 in quizzes.
You did well, I have to admit. So,
thanks.
So this week, you and I get to sit down with Kinsie Tate. Kinsie is a licensed therapist as well as the founder of Restore Clergy. And we talked to her a lot about mental health and spiritual health and what's going on not only within our clergy, but within society at large. And so it is a delightful conversation, talk about some heavy things, but in the end, she gives us some hope to cling to. And I enjoyed our time with her.
Yeah, because if you haven't heard, mental health is kind of like a big topic of conversation these days.
Yep.
So I love the fact that she is honing in particular, clergy mental health. It's a really important topic.
Yeah. And she's out in Los Angeles, but she spent some time here in Oklahoma.
Absolutely.
So stay tuned. We'll be right back with Kinsie Tate.
I'm Reverend Starlette Thomas, director of the Raceless Gospel Initiative at Good Faith Media and host of the Raceless Gospel podcast. It's season 5, and we are giving you a love offering, an audio audit of the North American Church's messages about giving. A love offering. Join me, Reverend Starlette Thomas, your podcast pastor for season 5 of the Raceless Gospel podcast. Our 7 episodes will drop weekly on Wednesdays, beginning September 4th. Subscribe wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts and learn more at goodfaithmedia.org.
Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly. On this episode, we've got a very special guest with us. Reverend Kinsie Tate is the founder and executive director of Restore Clergy. Kinsie received her Master's of Divinity from Phillips Theological Seminary and her Master's of Education in Applied Behavioral Studies from Oklahoma City University. She was ordained in and maintains endorsement with the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. She was licensed as a licensed professional counselor in Oklahoma in 2012 and a licensed professional clinical counselor in California in 2021. She is a certified truce coach and has been a therapist for over a decade and maintains a private therapy practice in Newport Beach, California. Kinsie, welcome to Good Faith Weekly.
Thank you. It's great to be here with y'all.
So, Kinsie, we have many things we want to talk to you about today. Maybe a little bit of therapy happening as we go along.
First of all, you had the audacity to leave us in Oklahoma and go out to California. Right. So we may ask some advice on how to get there.
Right. So you are the founder and executive director of an organization called Restore Clergy that we learned about a couple of months ago when we were attending the Festival of Homiletics. And we wanted to have you on to talk a little bit about that organization. So let's start off by letting you tell us, what is Restore Clergy and how did it come to be?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm a therapist, but I'm also ordained clergy, and I'm also a clergy spouse. So that's a big piece of it as
the
well.
Trifecta.
Yes, I really get what it is to be clergy and the challenges and all of that goes with it. And as I'm sure you all are well aware of, clergy burnout has been a big issue for years. And I would say that clergy health in general has been deteriorating for a while. And so I decided and really kind of felt called to address that issue. We have all this data stating that it's a problem, but there aren't a whole lot of programs that I feel like are specifically addressing that issue. And so I brought together all of my experience and created a program to help clergy, to really help them build resiliency so they can have faithful and sustainable ministry. Because the sustainability piece is really, I think, what is problematic. I think a lot of people are going into the ministry, they're just not able to sustain. So yeah, that is kind of the origin stories, if you will, of restored clergy.
So I'm surprised, being that you do this with clergy and then also have your, private practice as well. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
That you had any time for us today.
Right.
Because I'm guessing people are clamoring at your door.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I'm in this weird space of I've been putting a lot of time and energy into restored clergy. And we're not quite to the point where that is sustainable for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so my private practice has suffered. And so now I'm shifting back. And so I'm really trying to figure out, how can I not burn out?
Right.
If I'm the whole practice what I preach kind of thing. And so I'm in that space of, creating anything takes time.
Mm-hmm.
And I am such an idealist. I'm like, yes, everyone knows that this is a problem. Here's the answer, and it's going to be great, and it's going to take off. And it's like, well, it hasn't gone according to plan,
Right.
which I think that's the way that God works a lot of times.
Sure.
And so I'm really trying to figure out what is a good rhythm, what is realistic in this time and space. And I think a lot of it is having these conversations helps me to articulate what it is exactly that I do, but then also helps people to know, why does this matter? How is it different? And why should I participate?
Yeah.
And so I really like having these conversations because, like I said, it really helps me to kind of articulate it more effectively so that people really understand what am I doing and why does it matter and how can it help?
Yeah. Well, Kinsie, as a clergy person, someone married to a clergy person, talking to a clergy person, we all know that our clergy were under a tremendous amount of pressure prior to the global pandemic that was unleashed in 2020. But something happened when the pandemic came upon us that really put even more pressure upon our clergy, really providing an incredible amount of stressors. And we began to see an escalation of clergy talking about burnout, leaving their ministries behind, just based upon all the anxiety that was upon their shoulders. So here we are, it's 2024 now, halfway through the year. So 4.5 years, really about 4 years from the heart of the pandemic itself. So if you could provide for our listeners, what are some of the more specific issues that you are hearing from clergy that has been really burdensome for them, even before the pandemic, but especially highlighted during the pandemic and post-pandemic?
I think the way I'm going to answer that is I'm going to tell my story.
Okay.
And looking at, because I was in Oklahoma. My husband he's United Methodist clergy, Disciples of Christ clergy. So he was working in a local congregation. And it was literally January of 2020. And he was in LA for a leadership thing,
Right.
Something that the church does with their clergy. And from that, it kind of snowballed to where we had an opportunity to move out here.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like, okay, do we want to do this? And we were just like, okay, why not? How often do you get these kind of opportunities? Let's go. And when we made that decision, it was before the world shut down.
Right.
So the reason I tell this story is I think a lot of people were just kind of doing what they always do. And then this major thing happened that completely shifted the way that we do day-to-day life. Mm-hmm. And what happens as human beings is our brains are incredibly efficient. They like routine. They like patterns. we create these synaptic pathways that really help us go on autopilot so that life is like easier.
Right.
And the more synaptic pathways we have, the easier things can be. They can also lead to boredom and just like, lethargy and all that kind of stuff. And so when a huge shift happens like this, that our synaptic pathways are like, what just happened?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is normal. I can't be on autopilot anymore. This is so much work just to function in day-to-day life. We as adults are really terrible at that. Kids are really resilient, because they're like still creating all these synaptic pathways and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And ours can be really rigid. So part of what we do in Restore is really try to increase that complexity fitness. So what that is really like getting a little bit more mobile in our brain. We talk about stretching with our bodies and even weightlifting and that kind of stuff. But really what we want to do is kind of increase how flexible we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people found out that in the pandemic, they're not very flexible mentally. And maybe not even physically, that amount of stress can really wreak havoc on the body.
Yeah.
And so they were tasked with this, like almost overnight, figure out how to do church when we can't get together. And it's like, yeah, but we're bonding mammals. We kind of need to be together to really do that whole thing well. And it's like, yeah, Zoom is great, but it's very different from being in someone's presence and experiencing, that connection and whatever is holy that happens in those spaces. Sure. And so, it was not only I'm dealing with my family and my personal stress, but now this organization that maybe used to be kind of easy to deal with, like worship. I get into a rhythm of worship. I know how to do that. Maybe preaching is still a little stressful, but all the other stuff, there's a rhythm to it. Now it's not only am I dealing with all of that, but I also have to figure out, how do I do this and stay safe? Mm-hmm. Like and so many people had so many different opinions about what kept us safe. Then that also created all this conflict, which can also, we're not only dealing with like the physical safety of not getting COVID, but then this emotional safety of, do I belong? Are they going to get mad at me? Am I going to lose my job? All of that strain. It's no wonder that people were burning out left and right.
Sure.
And, hiding at, I say hiding at home, but it's like avoiding.
Yeah, that's very interesting because, the pandemic certainly happened on a mass scale and, the kind of the macro level of everybody was dealing with this, but it was a change in routine. And so, we had to figure out how to minister within this liminal space that we found ourselves in of not knowing what was going to come next. That can also apply to smaller situations in minister's life. Something that happens within the congregation that is unexpected, that disrupts the day-to-day operation, that you got to ask those questions again. Maybe not on a global global scale or macro scale, but certainly on a micro scale. But it disrupts the flow, and so your analysis is really interesting because that disruption of normality, that disruption of safety, really begins to make us feel unsafe and disturbed about our surroundings.
I love the just kind of the explanation you gave us of the synapses and how an adult brain works and how we aren't as pliable anymore. But kind of from the other angle of this, we have, many of our listeners are not clergy, but they are, part of a faith community. And how can our faith community, how can our church members, how can we as that community be better? How can we support our clergy people in times like these? Because I know we're talking about COVID, which was 4 years ago, but it does not feel like we have been out of crisis mode in all of that time. No doubt. It just seems like we have just gotten used to living always on heightened alert. And so I know we're talking about this, but it just doesn't feel like it's settled, I don't think. So how can we as a church, as that community of faith, better support, better see, warning signs? What should we be doing?
it is really interesting because I think we are still collectively having a trauma response.
That's the word I was
There we
looking
are.
for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think a lot of people understand that. And honestly, we're not far enough out from it to really fully understand it.
Mhm.
I think what we can experience is exactly what you were talking about is like, I don't quite feel settled. I don't, and for a lot of people, I don't quite feel safe.
Hmm.
And the issue is that when we don't feel safe, we are in a defensive stance. So we're going to have more cortisol flowing through our bodies. We're going to have more short responses to people. It's going to be harder to be compassionate and really be curious about people and not have snap judgments. So I would say the same thing to people universally is deal with your stuff, like really do this work, like try to figure out the same thing. It's like, wow, that really irritated me. My pastor didn't pick up the phone and I really needed them in that moment. It's like, okay, well, why did that irritate you? What are you making that mean? Are you making that mean that your pastor doesn't care about you?
Hmm.
Are you making it mean that you don't matter? It's like, because those things probably aren't true. And what happened is that maybe your pastor not picking up the phone triggered your stuff. Your pastor can't help you with that.
Yeah.
And it's really not about them, it's about you. And so I think the more that we can understand, what am I bringing into this situation? What are those beliefs? What are those traumatic experiences that maybe are informing how I'm reacting here? All of that kind of stuff. And I know like this is the work that I do. I'm a therapist, like I dig into this with people all the time. And it can feel really daunting in the beginning, because I think a lot of people feel like, well, I don't know, I just reacted. Like
Right.
they just made me mad. And it's like, okay, well, there was some other stuff going along in there. We can slow it down and back it up. But I do think that it helps to either have a safe community to process that stuff with. Maybe it's just a therapist, maybe it's a coach, maybe it's a pastor, spiritual director. I think there's lots of ways to do this. But if we feel too stressed out, or we feel unsafe, or we feel lonely, it's really hard to do that vulnerable work. But oftentimes that vulnerable work helps combat all of those things that we just mentioned.
We hope that our clergy who are listening check out Restore Clergy at restoreclergy.com. But let's kind of dive into maybe some specifics where if there's a moment where, whether it's a clergy person or just someone who wakes up each and every day trying to get through the day, if they find themselves at a breaking point, do you have some really quick or things that you can give them to help them through that moment so that they can get the help they need in the long term? Because I mean, it can happen in an instant these days. I mean, you get a news report, you get a text message on your phone, you get a phone call. Something will trigger that, like you mentioned a moment ago. What is something we can do to react to that immediately to help bring some calmness of mind and spirit at that moment so that in the long run we can find the long-term help we need?
Yeah, absolutely. So what usually happens is we have a news report or something like that. It triggers an emotional response, which then activates our nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I would say in those moments is two things. One is identifying like, this is not the end of the story.
Right.
Like just noticing this is a moment in time and I feel hopeless. And I feel really hopeless. And at that moment, stepping back and trying to go into your body. And what I mean by that is figuring out, maybe just pausing and thinking, where do I feel this? Oh gosh, I've got sour stomach. Oh my gosh, I've got this headache, that like this tension in my head that just like is making this so much harder. Maybe your pulse, like maybe your heart rate's gone up. Maybe you're getting sweaty palms. And so trying to really ground yourself physically in your body and try to figure out, okay, what's happening here? Like, what do I think I need? Maybe you need to move. I know a lot of times I need to go outside and I need to take a walk.
Yeah.
Especially if it's really like I'm frozen. If we look in fight, flight, or freeze, if you're frozen, you really want to activate. So you want to activate the nervous system and move. Maybe like taking some more shallow breaths to get like your cardiovascular system moving. There's lots of different things that you can do. If you're in fight or flight, like you're real angry, or you just want to kind of run away, like everything feels overwhelming, then you want to calm down. And so that's where meditation, prayer, deep, slow breathing, that kind of stuff can really help. So that's what I would say immediately is one, the first thing is try to identify, like, just a minute ago I was okay, and now all of a sudden I'm not.
Right.
Let's see if I can ride this wave and just kind of let some time pass before I make any decisions.
Yeah.
And then really try to go into your body and calm down your nervous system so you have clarity. And sometimes it takes a couple of days to really feel like I can look at this and make rational decisions, depending on the intensity of the, nervous system response.
Yeah. Is there a point, Kinsie, that you would advise a clergy person who is really struggling to consider setting their call aside and pursuing another profession? Because one of the things that we continue to hear is that there's such an immense pressure put upon clergy, whether that's an outside pressure or more specifically an internal pressure, to continue with this calling, even to the extent of just the most horrible damage you can imagine mentally, spiritually, and physically on a person. At what point would you suggest, and I know there's a lot of nuances to this, so forgive me, but is there a point where you look the clergy person in the eye and say, this isn't worth it, you need a change of environment?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I don't believe that God calls us to die on the cross. Jesus already did that for us. And I think a lot of clergy people can feel that martyrdom and that like intensity of like, this is so important and it matters so much. Like, if I'm not doing it, then I'm letting God down. And I don't believe that's true. I firmly believe that if God calls us to something, then God also is on the hook for provision. And I think a lot of times when we are in that place of despair and hopelessness, we can get very myopic and tunnel vision of there's only one way to achieve this. And it can put so much pressure on us as an individual that I have to do it. And it's like, no, you don't. You absolutely don't. You don't even have to give up on your call. Maybe it's just that the call has shifted and we are physical beings. And if your body and your psyche are breaking down to where you're not functioning, I don't believe that God calls us to that. I believe that's antithetical to what God wants for us. And so I think what's so hard about that is when we are severely depressed, when we are in burnout, when we are, stressed to the max, that creativity goes out the window. And again, our brains are trying to be extremely efficient. And it's like, this is what we have to do. This is it. And it's like, we don't have any creativity. And that's where we need help. That's where we need the community, either a professional person, a friend. Sometimes our friends try and they're not really helpful. So you have to be kind of selective of who you're choosing to talk to. Because in our spouse, even, because sometimes it can freak our spouse out and they go into their own tunnel vision. It's like, well, what are we going to do? Where are we going to live? How are we going to survive? And it's like, that's not, I completely understand it. And that can just add fuel to the fire. And so that's where having communities like this, and not just clergy connection, I think a lot of denominations really try to do that, and it's helpful in some regard. But what what we really need as human beings is we need to belong. We need to feel like we are seen, we can be our ugly, ragged, beautiful self and belong.
Yeah.
And so often these clergy gatherings, like, we say we're not competitive, but in a lot of these systems, there's competition going on. And we can get into that. Our insecurities show up as like, well, I mean, I've got like 150 on Sunday morning. And it's like, good for you. Are they doing anything? Or are we just showing up and having a party,
Right.
So it's whatever metrics and all that kind of stuff. So
Sure.
I guess that's what I would say to that is absolutely no. We are the only way to do ministry is not in the church.
Yeah.
And if the church is killing you, then let the church go and allow God to do ministry through you in a different way. You can absolutely do it in whatever job you're doing.
So what are some of the ways, I don't know that we specifically said this in the beginning when talking about restore clergy. How does restore clergy actually function? Is it a one-on-one type of situation? Is it through cohorts or group sessions? Is it in person, virtual? Tell us, practically what is.
Yes. Yeah. So it's all of those. We got a little bit of everything. So right now I have the capacity to meet with people one-on-one. And so what I'm doing is kind of like mini coaching sessions. So it's like 4 sessions. If people don't want to wait for the Restore Fellowship, which is the cohort program, we can go ahead and get started. And for some people, it's like, that's enough. That works. That gets them some clarity, helps them kind of identify a few things that can help them move forward. It can also be a way to just start and tiptoe into it, see if you're comfortable with me, because I'm the one that does the Restoration Fellowship. And we know that a lot of times, if it is, we're doing this deep work, you want to feel comfortable with the person that you're doing that with. So it gives people an opportunity to try that out. The main thing that I really feel like makes the biggest difference is the restoration cohort. And that is a process where we begin with a week-long in-person retreat, because, most people coming to this work need to retreat and rest. But what it also does is it allows us to be in each other's space in person, to have those hallway conversations where you're talking about your kids or you're talking about the other stuff that's outside of the work. And it also gives people an opportunity to just disconnect and rest. And so that is week long. We do some of the beginning work during that time, and then we meet virtually. For currently the program is a year. And so we meet virtually. It's roughly like twice a month, as a group, and they're small cohorts of clergy. They're ecumenical because, sometimes we see the same people over and over and over again. And it's like, I don't really want to talk to them about my stuff. Like they're a peer. So I'd rather not have that pressure. And then we gather together at the end for another in-person retreat. But during the what I call the meat and potatoes of the program, when we're doing the virtual piece, is we go through like a 6-step framework. So really, we start off, we identify, what do you want? Like, I call it the restore goal in the workbook that I do, but it's really, what do you want? And it's not so much, I want people to stop bothering me. It's like, well, I can't help you with that. What I can help you with is I want to make self-care a priority. Like that we can do. Yeah. And then the next place from that is, what do you believe around that? Well, I believe that people that rest when there's work to be done are lazy. It's like, oh, okay, that's definitely going to impact your ability to practice self-care. So we kind of look at, what are those stories? What are the beliefs that you have around that goal, desire? Then from there, we look at, identify the emotional pieces around that. Then we identify the physical pieces around that. So that's the nervous system response. And from there, we identify, what are the experiments you want to try? Now that we really understand why this is hard for you and why you haven't been successful doing this previously, now we kind of look at what's reasonable. What do you want to try while we're in this process, while you have this community support that's doing this with you, while you have the support of me that's done it before with other people, and then you actually practice. So we do all the prep work of, instead of just, I've identified what I want and now I'm going to do it. It's like, well, you can do that. It's a lot of trial and error, and it can really make us feel like we can't do it.
Yeah.
It can actually add to our feelings of worthlessness, inadequacy, not belonging. And so it can backfire. So this is a more extensive process of really kind of understanding, how do I make these decisions and really kind of determine what's actually going to help me.
Could a non-clergy person reach out to you through your website for coaching and for any other help that they might need?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, I do. I mean, I still have a private therapy practice, and I can see people across the nation for coaching. We can absolutely do some of this work individually. People want to reach out and do that.
Excellent. Well, Kinsie Tate, thank you so much for joining us. Kinsie is the founder and executive director of Restore Clergy. You can find out more about Restore Clergy at restoreclergy.com. But Kinsie, before we let you go, we're going to ask you one last question that we ask every one of our guests, and Missy has the privilege of asking it.
So, Kinsie, as you know, our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So in light of our conversation today and the work that you do, what is your more to tell?
Well, I do want to let people know that I have a contract with Church World Service, and they are sponsoring a restoration cohort that's going to start in January. So if people are interested in that, please reach out to me. Again, go to my website, restoreclergy.com, and that's an opportunity coming up. And I'm really excited that Church World Service is doing this work, because they are helping fund clergy to be able to get involved in this really important work.
Excellent.
Well, Kinsie, thank you so much for joining us. You are welcome back anytime. And again, could I get 2 for 1 on the co-host therapy? Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Kinsie.
Well, Missy, we talked a lot about mental health, spiritual health with Kinsie. Was just kind of taken back to that place of tension that a lot of our clergy feel, but also, larger society feels as well, but more specifically our clergy.
Yeah, and I think something we talked about in the interview was, in my view, just the fact that we kind of jumped off from COVID.
Yeah.
But like I said, I don't feel like we've been out of that just heightened sense, or as she said, that, kind of trauma space yet. And here we are midway through 2024. And of course, going to an election season doesn't help tamper that down at all.
Yeah.
But something I just appreciated about our conversation and in thinking of, we all know there's a great need for mental health care right now in our society. But I was thinking, even getting outside of the clergy space, I feel like there's such a need for specialization in any occupation. Well, for everyone, but in particular, those folks who have felt called to serve. Right. Your first responders, your teachers, your clergy, and you could go on and on from there. And so it is such a need. They need our support. They need the support of mental health professionals to help deal with all of the things that are thrown at them right now.
Yeah. And that's such an excellent point. In part of the conversation she talked about, in fact, you brought the point up about this continuation of trauma that we have been through and continue to hold on to throughout this, throughout the last several years. But I think about, you talked about first responders. I think about those doctors and nurses who are on the front lines of COVID, and just trying, I don't know if they've ever been given the opportunity to really, truly unpack that.
No.
Because, they went through hell for a solid year. And, we heard about it. We read stories about it. We heard from their own voices. But, not only did they go through that, but so many other of our first responders went through that and continue to go through that. And just the deep need for us to try to unpack that. I don't know how to do that. And I think that's the most difficult. You and I've talked about this before. I'm tired of going through once in a lifetime moments.
Well, like our son, I think it was our younger son who said something about, I just want to live in precedented times for a minute,
Right.
Because our kids especially feel like they've just been, they were born, around the age of 9/11. And so everything has been unprecedented for them in their lifetime. And so that's another age group we need to pay attention to. And I don't know what the answer is. I think, and like we're talking about first responders, and as she was talking about, or we were talking about in the interview, the number of clergy who have left that vocation in terms of, the way we think of it,
Right.
And pivoted to living out a calling in a different way or leaving that altogether. I mean, same is true for first responders, for doctors, for our police, firefighters, our paramedics, and then also our teachers.
I was about to think of teachers.
And our teachers, how many teachers are leaving the profession? And I'm so sad about that because that tells us as a society, we are not doing what we need to do to take care of those folks who do choose a profession based on an ability to support yourself. Obviously, that's what we all do, but just on that call to serve. And we need to do better by them. We need to do better by those folks who are out there putting their life and their mental health on the line day in and day out.
Yeah. So I'm so glad that there are people like Kinsie out there that are helping our clergy, and there are other therapists and counselors out there that people can reach out to. We're always encouraging folks to find a therapist, to stay ahead of their mental health and to make certain that they are getting what they need before they find themselves at a critical point. So that's vitally important to be engaged, to be aware, to make certain that you're taking care of yourself.
Absolutely, I agree.
So thanks for participating in the survey earlier on in the episode.
The quiz.
The quiz, yeah.
You're very welcome.
You did a great job. So.
We have one more week of Olympics, I think.
I think one more week of Olympics. Think you can come up with a quiz next week?
I have something fun for us to talk about, but I'm not sure if Cliff will approve it. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. We'll see. So we'll be back next week. Until then, keep living good faith. You've been listening to Good Faith Weekly, hosted by Mitch and Missy Randall. This weekly podcast from Good Faith Media discusses matters of faith and culture.
Subscribe wherever you get your podcast and give us a like and a glowing review. We produce the podcast out of Norman, Oklahoma. Our music comes from Pond 5.
And we're supported by listeners like you. Learn more about us at goodfaithmedia.org.